The thing with imposter syndrome is it's a little bit of a buzzword at the moment. So I do want to caution there is a difference between actually having imposter syndrome and self-doubt.
Hello and welcome to Motion Matters. This is the entrepreneurial podcast where we talk about the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship. Today, I have Romy Van Der Merwe with me, and I'm very, very excited. She has her own business talking about various aspects of entrepreneurship and coaching as well, and I'm excited to dive deep into that. So with that, Romy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Yes, I'm super excited. I feel like today for me will be a little bit more about being a student of yours rather than a host of the show, but I'm happy to be in that position and excited to hear everything you have to say. So
fabulous.
With that, I'd like to turn it right over to you and just give a chance for you to kind of introduce yourself, tell a little bit of background about where you came from, who you are, and ultimately, how did you get into entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Cape Town, South Africa. Lived there for a good part of my life. My mom is German, my dad is Austrian. They sent me to a British kindergarten, a German school. Then through the swimming, I got a scholarship to an Afrikaans university. Later on, I got a scholarship to Florida State University. So swimming was, from an early age, very much part of my life. And I was lucky that through the swimming, I got to travel a lot. I was competing internationally. I was representing both South Africa and Florida State at some stage. I was on the dean's list. I got to compete at NCAAs. So on the surface level, everything was looking really, really good. I had all these accolades and everything was going really well. But internally, it was a whole different ballgame from pretty much from day one. I always had the sense that I'm not achieving enough. I'm not doing enough. I could be doing more if I just applied myself more. And the swimming is just a really, really good example here because for me, coming from South Africa, swimming in America is like the ultimate achievement. The swimming in America is like the mecca for swimming. So when I got my scholarship, it was amazing, and I went to Florida State. But then it was like this momentary excitement, and then it just kind of didn't feel good enough, like I hadn't actually achieved enough. So my next goal was then, like, to really have made it, you have to swim at NCAAs. Following year, I swam at NCAAs. But that was also like a momentary achievement. And then again, I was like, okay, but now I've done it. Now that's it. Like it didn't feel good enough. So then my next feeling was, well, you actually need to final at NCAAs. So I always had, throughout swimming and throughout my career in every aspect of life, really, I always had the moving goalpost syndrome. So I achieved whatever I set myself out to achieve, but then it just wasn't good enough. I didn't take time to celebrate the wins. I didn't take time to acknowledge what I had achieved. And my default was always just to train more, work more, put in more hours, which really then just always led to either overtraining, overworking, burnout. And in the swimming example, I had done the Olympic qualifying time about a year prior to the Olympic qualifying trials. And in the month of trials, I was so burnt out, I quit. So I didn't even go. I didn't even try. And this is a regret that I will really have for the rest of my life. And I didn't realize at the time that it was a cycle that I was repeating. So when I then started my real estate career, so also was successful from relatively early on there, but it never mattered how much I made, how much I achieved, the feedback that I was getting from my clients, which was amazing at the time. I was always looking for this external validation, this external somethingness to tell me that I've actually done a good job. And while I might have gotten that by clients telling me that I'm doing a good job, it was never lasting. So again, I felt that I had to work harder, work longer, do more. And it got to a point where, again, I was burned out. And I then had a very specific incident at work, at the company that I was previously with, where the team that I was working with at that stage, I had just had my second baby, so he was about a month old or 6 weeks, somewhere there. And they then decided, because I wasn't there for the last month or 6 weeks of the deal, that they're going to cut down my commission. And something changed. Something in me changed then, where I'm like, this is not right. And for the first time, I really sat down and I looked back at what I had achieved and what I had done. And I did this to motivate why my commission shouldn't be cut down. But it just opened up this whole Pandora's box of what my life had been and my reactions had been up until that point. And that really led me into my life coaching experience, or my life coaching journey, specifically the imposter syndrome, which I hadn't really understood until that time. And then I got into the life coaching, and the specific focus is to help people identify their reactions to things, to work through the imposter syndrome, to clear that, and then to be able to confidently move forward in their careers. So that was a long answer. No, actually,
that was relatively short, because I know that you've probably had tons of various, your own life experiences in that journey up to that point. So I actually want to just, rewind just a little bit and talk about, so if I understand what you were saying is you were working in the space of real estate at the time when you basically reassess your own situation / kind of end up reflecting ultimately on everything that had happened to you in your life, when you, for lack of a better term, got the entrepreneurial itch and said, you know what, I'm going to build something for myself. Is that correct?
It's absolutely. So also I didn't realize that it was always kind of part of me, but I was taught that the correct path is you go to university, you study a degree, whatever it is that you study, that's what you do. And you work really hard, and then you get the promotion, and then you have your 20 days of leave annually, and that's a successful life.
Yeah.
But in looking back, that's not, like, I really believe it's just not the case anymore. Like, things have changed, life has changed, the world has changed. And being an entrepreneur it's so much more than having your own hours to work. It's working on something that you are passionate about, that you enjoy. And if you can work on something that you enjoy to such an extent that it will always remain work, but it's something that actually gets you motivated and excited to get up and go out and do, that's what is going to, in my opinion, have you be successful versus working the traditional career plan.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. It's very interesting because I know that most people, that grew up in the obviously old, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, we've all been, in that mindset. And I'm sure even to some extent still today. But it's interesting because more and more, I think in the newer generation, there is more push and more discussion about entrepreneurship. I mean, part of it's probably my upbringing, but I don't even remember anybody even mentioning that word. I don't think I ever heard that word.
I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah. And I resonate a lot with, your story. Yeah, I think there's I always had an entrepreneurial bug, but I don't think I understood what that really was. And I also resonate with the part of your story where you talked about constantly trying to do something else because you were trying to accomplish or prove something. 100,000%. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, the entrepreneurial bug, as you call it, I quite like that. It wasn't a thing in the 70s, 80s, and maybe a bit more in the 90s, but definitely not prior to the 90s. It just wasn't a dinner table conversation, and you didn't know quote unquote entrepreneurs really. It was the successful people were those that were lawyers, or they were doctors, or they were whatever traditional professions were. And the people that did their own thing were a little bit the mavericks, right? Well, who do they think they are to go out and do their own thing? But it's become so much more acceptable and so much more conversational and so much more in daily life. And it's a whole different platform that we are working from nowadays than we did in the 70s and 80s and even prior to that.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite an exciting time to be starting your own thing, because I feel there's a lot more conversation around it. There's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more people you can connect with. And what I really personally love about the entrepreneurial, still a difficult word for me,
same.
But the entrepreneurial, should I say, culture, is that most often, if you were to reach out to someone they will give you the time of day, and they will have a cup of
Yeah.
coffee with you, a virtual or whatever, and just give you a little bit of their time and a little bit of advice and whatever. And I really appreciate that. And I think that's very much a accolade, or not an accolade, but like a great thing that people can tap into nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really interested in asking you this because, so just to share with you a smidgen of mine, I graduated high school, did a bunch of jobs, truck driving, ultimately joined the military, spent 24 years before I had my moment that was very similar to your moment, where I was sitting in a hotel room and I was reflecting on everything. And basically my epiphany was, why am I not building something for myself? Very similar to your story. I'm leaving out tons of details, but it's all good. But that occurred, roughly in the 2017 timeframe. I didn't actually exit until 2020. But since that time, I've started multiple businesses. I started off heavily in the real estate. My question to you is that I'm very interested to hear your story about is, how did you land on coming straight out of the gate as I want to be a coach and a mentor? Because for me, that never even crossed my mind. I really didn't think about it. I didn't have interaction. To me, it was just like, hey, I'm going to start a business. So I'm interested, like, how did you land on that? Was somebody, encouraging you or mentoring you, or did you just, kind of reflect on things and then it came to your own fruition? How did that happen?
So my brother-in-law's sister, she has a life coaching company in South Africa, and her and I just started having a conversation, and everything just clicked and fell into place, because this life coaching was something that I just hadn't known of or thought of previously. And everything that her and I were speaking about was just so exactly what I was looking to do, where I got to work with people, I got to help them with overcoming the imposter syndrome, working on a business perspective, get the career accelerated, and all those things that I had been wanting help with, I could offer from a life coaching perspective. So I then did my qualification and accreditation through her, and that really started off the whole life coaching career.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm kind of traveling into that aspect of it now as well. Interesting that one of your specialties is talking about imposter syndrome. As I've told other people, I legitimately did not hear of that word till probably a little over a year ago. Didn't really understand what it meant. And then more recently, as kind of things have transpired for myself, really understood that probably I was battling with that as well on many different instances. So I guess there's so much that I know that you could say about it, but let's start off by just asking you, did you have your own self-realization of imposter syndrome, or was that just a product of you digging in?
I realized that there was something going on in the fact that I could never, regardless of what I achieved, it was never good enough. And I had people telling me, but you need to just sit and realize what you have achieved and what you have done. And I was like, yeah, but I could always do better, because look at someone else. They've achieved X, they've achieved Y, they've done so much more. And it was always this external validation. And then somewhere along the line, I just had this sit down and this realization that this isn't normal. You can't just always be chasing after something. And then I took to Google and I just started putting in what I'm feeling and what's happening. And then I saw this term, imposter syndrome, for the first time. And once I saw that, then I'm like, I ticked so many of those boxes. Then I went on the whole imposter syndrome journey, connected with coaches who helped me understand it better, where it was coming through, work through it. And so it's a little bit of a journey. But to touch on what you mentioned earlier on, that you didn't know of this term either, like previously before a year or so. The thing with imposter syndrome is it's a little bit of a buzzword at the moment. So I do want to caution there is a difference between actually having imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So the easiest way I can explain this is with an example, if I may.
Yes, please.
And so let's take two people in a workplace setting. Workplace setting is the easiest. You've got person A both of them are told you have a presentation to give in a week's time. person A, for whatever reason, they just don't prepare. They don't do the work. They don't do anything. They wake up on the day and they're like, oh my goodness, I haven't done the work. It's not going to be good. What if they find out that I'm actually not capable of delivering it properly? What if I make mistakes? Everyone's going to laugh at me. They end up giving the presentation. The presentation is good. And they then claim the win. They're like, yay, well done me. I did a really good job. And that's it. They finished with it. So they were nervous for a time, but they kind of finished with the feelings and everything that they had around the presentation. Person B, on the other hand, they immediately either go completely into overdrive, hyper preparing, hyper hustling, hyper working, just putting all the hours, all the effort, everything goes into this preparation of this presentation. They look at absolutely every detail, making it absolutely perfect, stressing about the delivery, stressing about, well, what if I give this presentation, they're going to laugh at me, they're going to think I'm not competent, what if they find out that I'm actually a fraud and I shouldn't be here? So similar thoughts on the day. But it's such a long, exhausting, stressful build up to the day of the presentation. Then on the day of the presentation, maybe the presentation also goes really well. And instead of claiming the fact that they did a good job, it's more of a sense of a relief. They didn't find out that I'm not capable. I didn't make a mistake this time until next time. And that feeling perpetuates. So the person with self-doubt it's situational. They just didn't prepare. They didn't do a good job. So they had the self-doubt and this nerves around it, and they were done with it once the presentation was done, versus the person with imposter syndrome goes into hyperdrive or even procrastination, and there's various things that can happen, but it's an ongoing thing. And then instead of claiming the win that they have done a good job, it's a relief, and this feeling comes up again whenever the next presentation comes up.
That's good. I appreciate you taking the time to explain that. Because actually, I just got in a discussion with somebody recently, and they talked about how they didn't like that word at all. Because they feel
imposter syndrome?
Yeah, they said that, it comes with negative connotations about, how it how it affects people and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know, man. I just feel like it's a way to explain to people that a lot of people don't feel like they're worthy. I mean, you did a much better explanation. I was just broad brush stroking it. But yeah, so I appreciate you taking the time to explain that.
So I get that, because you don't want to be labeled, right? But the good thing, I guess, is if you know whatever that you have, that it is more than just self-doubt. There are tools and there are things that you can do to work through it. And I'm so often asked, well, what can I do to overcome this? And the short answer, unfortunately, is you can't just overcome it. You actually have to work through it. It is a little bit of a process. But if you stick with the process and go through it, that you can work your way through it and you can have confidence on the other side. So I do believe that it's actually a good thing to know what it is, and that there are possibilities of what to do and how to work through this.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I love doing this podcast. I really try to stay focused as much about you telling your story, the guests and stuff like that. But I mean, one quick little share is just that I recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, went to a course, and it was very emotional for me. And so, and to your point, like I've done a lot of stuff in my life that a lot of people probably would never consider, let alone complete. And I feel like it was the description you used before, where I was constantly trying to prove that I was worthy to myself, even though I don't think I realized that in many of those instances. So, yeah, I think all of that stuff and everything you're talking about culminating together, it really, man, it can make it difficult and challenging for people to want to be able to step into the ring, and get
absolutely. It definitely it holds you back. There's these inner thoughts, the comparison to other people, the constantly moving goalposts. It holds you back from really stepping into your true potential and stepping into what you are actually capable of doing. And I truly believe that everyone has so much ability within themselves and has this confidence. But we're also told by society what to do, how to act, how to look, how to eat, there's so much coming at us from so many different angles, and we just absorb this all, like consciously, unconsciously, we absorb all of this, and it just feeds into our subconscious thoughts of what we should be doing, and that then feeds into the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, whatever it is that we're feeling, and it holds us back from confidently taking the next step.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth, is because you got my brain thinking, and I'm trying to just connect some of the dots.
I love that. Fantastic.
Yeah, I tell people that fear is the number one thing that inhibits the vast majority of people from going after their dreams and aspirations. Is imposter syndrome just one form of that fear?
Fear is definitely an element of it. But I think fear is also quite a broad thing, because fear it can come up in so many different ways in life and show up in so many different ways. I think the very first thing is understanding this fear and also understanding where it comes from. So fear in and of itself is not a bad thing. Fear is actually something that historically has kept us safe. So let's use the saber-toothed tiger. I feel like everyone uses a saber-toothed tiger, so let's use him as an example. Where when we, way back when, we're living out in the wild, and we had to fend for ourselves. We had to, not fend for ourselves. We had to live in a group, in a community, rely on each other to survive as a species, as a human race, right?
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't just leave the community and go out on yourself, because this threat, the saber-toothed tiger, this whatever it is, was there, that was a threat. You were together, you were stronger together than what you were alone. So the fear is then you have to fit into society, because if you do not fit into society, into your group, then you can be excommunicated, you can be thrown out, and then you are out by yourself, and then you have to cope by yourself. So you have to fit in, you have to blend, you have to be part of the group. You can't stick out, because if you stick out, you're different, and if you're different, you might be frowned upon, you might be thrown out. So the fear is something that has kept us safe. But obviously we have evolved, and this fear now, the feeling is still the same, but we have a better understanding of how to deal with it. So again, it's a mechanism that has kept us safe, that we now understand where it's coming from, and that we have the tools to overcome it or to work through, and to not let it hold us back anymore.
Yeah. Excellent point. Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. Before we go too much further down the road, I want to kind of, again, just pull back a little bit to the point at which you decided to leave the previous career, found out or figured out what you felt like you wanted to pursue. One of the questions that I like to ask is, a lot of people, back to, we can use the word fear, or just talk about, apprehensiveness or skepticism. Was there any particular thing at that time that really kind of caused you to potentially reconsider whether or not you were going to do that? Let me give you an example. A lot of people are like, well, I have financial stability in my regular job, so I don't want to take that leap because I don't want a change of lifestyle, right? Because I realize there's going to be a dip, because many people maybe didn't financially prepare, so they don't have 20, 40, 50, $100,000 sitting on the bank so that they can transition. Was there anything during that time where you made your decision that kind of made you a little bit apprehensive to take the leap of faith?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. So starting anything by yourself, any form of entrepreneurship, is really, it is a leap of faith, and it's glamour. It's made out to be this glamorous thing, but it is not easy. It is not an easy thing to do. And I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered, that you need to look at before taking that step. And one of those things you've already touched on is finances. Just upping and quitting your job and starting something new is not available to a lot of people, because you do need to have a contingency plan. You do need to, like, maybe the business isn't going to work for the first 6 months, year, whatever it is. There needs to be some kind of in my opinion, I like to have a little bit of an overlap. So continue at your work so that you have your bi-weekly, your monthly, whatever paycheck, so you have that stability. And at the same time, start your own thing and start it incrementally. So personally, I didn't leap into it immediately. I started it in the evenings, I started it on the weekends, I started it while I still had an income that I could look after my family, because I had 2 little kids at that stage, family, it would just not have been the prudent thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me personally, I couldn't have taken that comfortably. I would have been too nervous to make that leap without having a bit of a transition period. So there definitely has to be a transition period of sorts, be it staying at work, being it having money in the bank, and starting it slowly until you are at such a point where your new company or where your new business or whatever it is can sustain your lifestyle, or at least reasonably sustain your lifestyle. I also think that if you're in a partnership, it needs to be a conversation with your partner, because it is going to be a change of life. You are working harder for a time, and you don't know how long that time frame is going to be. So your partner needs to understand that, needs to be on board with that. And it's an ongoing conversation to be had. It's very difficult if you just jump into something you're super excited and gung-ho about, but your partner is, I don't want to use the word resentful, but your partner is not quite on board. That can create some kind of friction. So I definitely think ongoing conversations is a really, really, really important thing. And the last thing is understand that any business takes time. It's not going to You're going to be a millionaire by Monday. And as wonderful as it is seeing these people that make it on Instagram seemingly overnight, it is a process. It does take time. And it's just the consistency is key. And yes, there will be ups, and yes, there will be downs. And just being able to, if you have a bad week, you have a bad month, or whatever it is, to be able to consistently connect with what is your ultimate goal. What is it that you are working towards? What is it that you ultimately want to achieve, so that can then keep on pulling you forward and keep you going into the direction of your dream and to ultimately achieve your dream. So it's really a combination of those three things that I believe are important to consider and to be aware of before jumping right into any form of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Excellent points. Excellent points. One of the things that I also talk about when I talk to some people that come to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. What's your thoughts?" There's so many aspects, but one of them is your circle. As many of us that are in the space have heard the infamous statement from, I believe, Jim Rome, that you are the total sum of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. So what's your advice to somebody about what their circle is and how that may impact their ability to be able to be successful as they enter into entrepreneurship?
That's a great question, and it's a very tough one for people to fully understand and to fully get on board with, because because you've had your friends for 20, 30 years, whatever it is, and now you're just starting this completely different thing, and they just won't understand. They don't understand your passion and why it is that you're giving up a good job or a stability or whatever it is and starting this. So I think I'm a big believer that you need to surround yourself with people that have been in whatever field you're going into. So create some kind of a support network, some kind of a group where people can share their experiences and are on the same track as you. So you can really learn from them, work with them, see the positives, also see the negatives, right? So you're learning. But the point of having this group of people is really to connect with them and for them to help you to continue going. And as you then really get really, really, really clear on what it is that you want, so really, really hyper clear on why you're doing it, why you're going after this, what is your motivation? Are you wanting to leave a legacy for your children? Are you doing this for your children? Are you doing this for your parents? Like, why is it that you're really doing it? So you're so motivated that either the people that are in your friend circle will get on board and will see this, or they will just slowly drop off, and then to be okay with that. If people are not on board with what your dream is, what your passion is, then maybe the friendship has run its course. And I think it's really important to be okay with that, and be okay with that in advance, because you want to have people in your corner. And I heard this funny saying the other day, which I think is very, very funny. So you start off with your circle of friends and you end up with a dot, but that dot is really the dot that keeps you going, right? They support you no matter what. They are there for you. They are your cornerstone, and they are the ones that just don't second guess you. They believe in you and help you to go forward.
Yeah, that dot is probably 2 to 3 people. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that 2 to 3 people of really people that believe in you so wholeheartedly and want the best for you is just so much better than having 20 people that don't believe in you, that aren't there for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I really wanted to hear your insight on that for anybody listening, just because I think you hit on one part that's really challenging, and that is accepting it, right? Because again, they've had I mean, as my mentor says, people get around and then, they want to talk about the stories from when you were in high school. We're like, oh, I remember back in the day and this and that. And it's like, dude, come on, man. Like that was your best days. Those were good days. They weren't my best days. The best days are to come. Right. But people get in, the same typical flow, and they don't want to stretch, they don't want to do that.
And that also ties into the fear that we were speaking about, because we know this circle, we know this group, we've been with them for however long, we can speak about, remember back in high school, we can have all those conversations. Whereas if you step away from this into something new, into something unknown, the fear element comes up again. Yep. So again, that's where we need to unpack that and understand that doing something new is not necessarily bad. It's just new. And with that newness is so much possibility and so much that can be done. So it is such a fabulous step forward, and it doesn't, versus staying where you are, which holds you back.
Can I ask you one more question about the beginning phase of your entrepreneurship? I like to ask as well, roughly, you don't have to be specific, but roughly from the time that you decided to step in until the time that you actually had a real business that was creating revenue for you, like what was that time frame like, and how discouraging and or encouraging was that, depending on what your particular situation was?
I can answer that exactly. It was 8 months. So the reason I know that, because I expected that I had done all these courses, that I got my certification, I was part of this amazing group, I had everything in place, my course was fully set out, everything was amazing. I thought 2 months tops, and 2 months came and went, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. So I very, very much remember that it was the longest 8 months, really the longest 8 months. And my husband, I was very lucky. He was the one that said, no, you need to stick with it. This is what you want to do. This is you're passionate about. So again, having that person that believes in you. Until then, in month 8 is when I signed my first client and things started getting going.
Oh, so 8 months before you got your first client. Exactly.
Absolutely. 0.
Great job.
I was doing a lot of free stuff,
yep,
but I wasn't actually getting paid for what I was doing. So it was a long 8 months.
Yeah. Great job. And staying in. Great job for your husband supporting that. I like to call them cheerleaders, right? I'm like, if you don't have great cheerleaders, you got to have
absolutely.
cheerleaders. So,
and that speaks to the circle of people that we have that support us, that believe in us, that want the best for us. And also previously what we were saying, that you have to be prepared for it not working out immediately, that it is going to take a little bit of time. And especially the coaching industry has now exploded, and there's just so many people that are coaches, both certified and uncertified. So the consumer is getting a lot more discerning, which is good. You do want to do your due diligence on the person that you could potentially going to be working with. But it also means that the consumer, the potential client, is just being bombarded with so many different things from different people and different elements in social media and all of that, that it takes people a little bit longer to get more confident with reaching out and with speaking to you and with starting the whole conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. The next thing that I would like to go into is when we first talked, you talked about that your business was about dealing with imposter syndrome. And then the second avenue of that, remind me, kind of one of the primary focuses
is career acceleration. So it's the business side of things.
Okay, great. So can we dig into that side a little bit?
Absolutely. So I believe that everyone has the potential inherently to find what it is that they're absolutely passionate about and to go after that. But in order to be able to do that, it's having to connect with your confidence first. And that's where the self-doubt or the imposter syndrome or whatever comes. So I really focus a lot of time on getting the person comfortable and confident with their ability. And a lot of that is really looking at your track record, looking at what you've achieved, looking at what you've done. Because I have never met or spoken to anybody that has not got an actual track record. But 9 times out of 10, they're not acknowledging it. So it's really just going back and seeing that all these things that you have done, you've not acknowledged it, you've not celebrated it. But if you start internalizing all of your achievements and everything that you've done, that's the first step to starting to build your confidence. So obviously there's quite a bit of time that we spend on working through that. And once we have that, then it's focusing on what is it that you ultimately want to do. And it needs to be, so what is your goal? And it needs to be more than I want to start my own business. You need to be so hyper clear on what is it that you want to do, why are you doing, and who are you doing it for? And once you really connect with that on a deep emotional level, and you truly understand who, what, and why you're doing this for, then we work on how to get there. And that's then through, we work on a very specific business plan, which is tailored to everybody specifically on how to get to the goal that they want to get to.
I don't want you to take too much, into necessarily your own inner workings per se, but like in general, broad brushstrokes, can you pull back a little bit more like into the layers of helping people discover their passion? And the reason why I'm asking you that is I find that this is one of those questions that's actually a bit challenging sometimes, is when, because I believe everything that you just said, right? I'm talking about me, myself. Hey, you need to figure out what it is that you're passionate about, because if you love it, then you don't hate work. And
yes.
But then when somebody says, well, hey, Jamie, how do I find my passion? Sometimes it's a little bit hard to give them the right direction. And I picked up, you talked about reflecting on your achievements in order to be able to build your confidence. And then from your confidence, that next phase, is there specific things that you talk to people about what they should do in order to kind of determine what that is that they're potentially passionate about?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a very specific process that I go through, and it's quite a lengthy thing. But the way I offer the course is that it's a combination of pre-recorded that people can do in their own time, and then the one-on-one sessions with me. And the pre-recorded sessions is very much going into this, because it's not a once and done conversation. Setting a goal, setting a true meaningful goal, is something that you come back to again and again and again until you are really, really, really sure that this is the right one. So my course is 8 weeks, and often of the 8 weeks, it takes up to 4 weeks to properly set the goal. So you can still be doing other things at the same time. But as you work through and as you understand why you're doing it and who you're doing it for and the ultimate vision of where you see yourself, that can take a little bit of time. So it's a difficult answer to condense here, but the easiest way to maybe start is to stripping everything away, stripping all the expectations, what you've been told in life, what you as yourself expect to do. If you would just be allowed to dream, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself sitting at a lake with an ocean view? I mean, with a lake view with your children? Do you have children? Do you want children? Just fleshing out that vision. And it's a very high, like lofty starting point. But once you have an idea of where it is that you want to work to, then you can start working on the goal or goals to get you there. But it is it is a process to work through that. And it's very specifically allowing yourself to think in a broader manner versus just, where do I see myself in 5 years' time? It needs to be more than what is my 5-year business plan or what is my 5-year goal. It needs to be bigger than that, because it really needs to be something that just is so motivating to you that you're so deeply connected to it that there is just no other way. That is what you want, and therefore that is what will happen.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was a little bit of like this self-discovery. I think a little bit of like thinking about the times when people would make comments about, hey, you're really good at, and then they fill in the blank, right? Hey, you're really good at, and consistently hearing that from people, and then starting to think about, am I, and then also like, do I enjoy that? And I guess that's kind of where I'm going to, is like, at one point, my wife said to me, she's like, what is it that makes you happy? And I said, I genuinely like helping other people. When I see them have their own revelation or whatever, it's very exciting, and I like helping them come up with the vision. And that's kind of was like my moment, to your point. So anyway, I appreciate you. I know that was a bit of a challenging thing to try to explain, and I understand that, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's an interesting aspect of trying to figure it out what it is that you want to do.
Mm.
And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from you on that point that I hope other people is that it may not be instantaneous, and you need to be prepared to go through a process of self-discovery in order to be able to figure out what that is. Fair enough?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Romy. So,
Sure.
yeah, so I kind of just want to ask you a couple more questions as we kind of wind down here. And one of the questions is, so if there's anybody listening and they're an aspiring entrepreneur, or they're in the business and they're just looking for some more, educational aspects of entrepreneurship, is there any particular like piece of advice that you would give to the previous Romy about like, hey, if I could only have gone back and, considered this, I would have done it differently?
That's a good question. So I think for me personally, I really struggled with perfectionism. So for me to even get started, I had to make sure that the course was fully built out, the website was done, like everything had to be absolutely perfectly done. But, oh, did I lose you again?
No.
Oh, okay. but what I would like to, I think the biggest thing I would have liked to have told myself is that perfectionism is subjective. And every attempt that we make and every step that we take towards our dream and towards our goal, no matter how imperfect we might believe that it is a step forward. And we also have the choice. So if something doesn't maybe go exactly the way we had planned it to go, we have a choice to take the knowledge from this, to learn from it, because I really believe that knowledge is power, and we have the option to grab this knowledge and really to let it move us forward as opposed to hold us back. So I think that would be my biggest advice is start. Don't hold back. Don't try and make whatever it is perfect. Don't sign up for a million courses and a million things to do. Get going. And as you go, you will learn as you do. You will get better. In fact, the first few times you're going to do it, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be great. But the more you do, the more you'll learn, the more you'll try, the more you'll get better, the more you'll get confident. And it's really about starting.
Yeah, I love that. And as I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of a book that I read that talks about Scrum. Are you aware of that?
Book?
Method? Well, the book is, I believe it's Good to Great, if I recall, that talks about Scrum. I'm looking over at my bookshelf to see if I can see the title. But Scrum is a methodology. It was taken from rugby, but I'll give you the super short version of it. I'm oversimplifying it. But the bottom line is we're only going to proceed forward at a finite amount of time before we reassess where we're at. And that if you do that, you can tend to make and recalibrate things at an earlier phase in order to potentially reach the end state at a much sooner point in time. And so that concept is like, for example, in the book, they talk about like the morning meetings are 15 minutes. Everybody's standing, nobody's sitting down. You're not getting comfortable. We're here with a very definitive purpose, and this is what we're going to do. But after 2 weeks, and they use this in the IT world a lot. So after 2 weeks, we're going to reassess and say, hey, where are we at with the process of this? And if that process needs changes, then we're going to make them at that point. We're not going to wait till we have a completed product, because if we do, we're going to perpetuate this thing. And one of two things is likely to happen. A, it's analysis paralysis. It never gets actually complete, and it never actually gets started. Or the second part of it is that we can never, ever get it, good enough in time for it to be, implemented. So anyway, I know that was overly stated, but I love it.
I love that. And also being South African, Scrum very much resonates with me. My husband was in the IT industry for a long time. So yes, it makes absolute sense. That's a very, very, very good analogy. Just to stack onto that. So I also really believe that there is no such thing as a mistake or a misstep. If you don't necessarily move forward, you have taken a step. And like you say, you can learn from that step, right? So it really boils down to how do we deal with it? Do we now realize, okay, this is not the direction we want to be achieving, so we pivot and we move another direction? Or do we get stuck in that? Which really speaks to your analogy about like just make the changes make the smaller incremental changes as you go along, as opposed to waiting right until the end to make massive changes.
Yeah, 100%. Same thing when I started the podcast. Like I wanted to have everything perfect. And if I'm being honest in this moment, like I did take a few steps to try to make it as best as I could. But the reality is within a few episodes, I made some changes. I changed the software, I changed some of the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. But I just knew that we needed to get started. Well, thank you for sharing that. Go.
Absolutely. And that's just so part of it, right? Because you wouldn't have known to change the software, for example, had you not started.
Yeah.
So it's really just, the point is just to get to a point where you are comfortable enough to start, with the understanding that there are going to not be mistakes, but there are going to be tweaks and changes to be made along the way.
Yeah. Said one other way, and I don't know if you would necessarily agree with it or not, but I'll throw it out there, is that great is the enemy of good enough. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And so as somebody who would constantly do what you, particularly in the military, when I would try to create my presentations, I want them to be absolutely perfect. And to the point where I'm measuring the different distances between some of the things in there. And one of the guys is like, dude, come on, man. Like, no one cares. Just give them the information. So I love the fact that you shared that. That's really good. Go ahead.
Actually, I think it's meant to be the other way around. So good enough is the enemy of great, because good enough is what holds you back from becoming great.
Yeah, I did say that flip-flopped. My bad. Thank you for the correction, Romy.
No, absolutely.
Sometimes when I word vomit, I'm so excited that I can't keep up with my thought process, and then everything gets, rearranged.
But you know what? I think it's excellent because now it's been highlighted, because I think it is such an important point, and it really is so just, I don't want to say the word obvious, but it's just really like good enough to not get stuck there. That is what's holding you back from being great. So I think it's really good to have extra highlighted it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also, I know we keep tag teaming back and forth, but that's what makes this a great conversation. I love it.
Yes.
One of the books by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. I tell people, look, I'm not saying that this is any life-altering thing where you're going to read this and be like, but there's so many key factors in there that you may understand, but you ain't implementing. So that's the question I always have people. I'm like, okay, I understand that you know this, but my question is, are you doing this? And I would say that probably 8 to 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, which is why this book is effective, because if you actually implemented what it is they're suggesting, then you would. Hence the reason why it's great to hire a coach like Romy, right?
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Jamie. Yes.
Well, with that said, that's a great segue into kind of just closing this out. And I just wanted to offer you an opportunity for anybody listening to this that's like, I really want to get in touch with Romy. Like, how can I, connect with you in order to be able to get some coaching, or maybe they want to hire you for a speaking engagement? Like, how can they get a hold of you?
Thank you. That's wonderful, Jamie. So I am super active on social media. So you can find me anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Romy V Coaching. I also have a website, Romy V Coaching. And what I'm offering at the moment is just a 30-minute, I call it a clarity call, where we just chat about what is going on, what do you feel is holding you back, and just uncovering that to be able to free you up to go out on what it is that you're looking for, towards what it is that you're looking for. And you can find the link to that at on my website is the easiest, but also LinkedIn you'll find it, and again Instagram, Facebook, everywhere at Romy V Coaching.
Thank you. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Romy, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. I'm very appreciative for you taking the time out of your day to talk to everybody and share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and, the struggles that we all go through in order to be able to get to where you currently are today. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
And thank you so much for having me here, Jamie. I really appreciate it. And obviously something that I'm very passionate about. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about it.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you again, and have a great day, Romy.
You too. Thank you.